Welcome to the RJLT Economics. In this podcast, I want to discuss the potential rapprochement between China and India. The idea of making this podcast has been lingering on my mind for a couple of months. And more recently, after the West sanctioned the Russian central bank, effectively seizing their assets, it became clear to me that a lot of the major economies who are not necessarily very closely aligned with the United States may be better off collaborating together in constructing a more balanced economic system that can work for more. And I have detailed my thoughts on this in a previous podcast. I think I will put the link in the description below. Now, in today's podcast, I want to keep it a bit short, but nevertheless, I want to divide it into three parts. In the beginning, I want to talk about the benefits if China and India could have a closer relationship, a better relationship, perhaps to seek some sort of modus vivendi and to collaborate more with the likes of Iran, Russia, and some Latin American powers, so that we can build a more balanced system for the future. And secondly, I want to discuss some of the difficulties that China and India face because of their differences. Right. And lastly, I want to discuss very, very concisely what I think the likelihood of a rapprochement will be. So first things first. What are the benefits? I see there are really a long list of benefits. Right. First, I think the two actually should have a closer relationship, because if we look at whether it is from a historic point of view or it is from a value or cultural point of view, the two nations don't have a lot of conflict. Or actually any meaningful point of conflict, right? Both are ancient civilizations. China has been a continuous sovereign state. India had a period of being subjugated by imperialism. And but nevertheless, both are very rich civilizations, and throughout history there were a lot of cultural exchanges, and really the two never had any major military conflict until recently in the 20th century, right? So there are no fundamental difference from what I can see. Now, you may say, some people would like to point out that India is a quote-unquote democracy, whereas China is not. But we could also say that both countries are developing their social systems, and neither country has the best of record when it comes to democratic expression. And I also think that, frankly, as I have discussed in my previous podcast, I think neither country is well suited to have a universal suffrage for everyone. There needs to be in my opinion, some sort of a representative democracy, so that people who are not really well informed of important decisions can be protected. Now, a lot of people can disagree with me on this. They may say that universal suffrage is one of the most important values, most precious values of a democracy. And be that as it may, I'm just trying to make a point that neither country actually has the best, and there are a lot of ways that the two can work together to promote, let's say, the construction of democracy, or the development of democracy in both countries. So that's the first point. And the second point is that if the two can have a much closer economic, cultural, and political tie, then with the collaboration of by working together with Iran and Russia, we can have a continuous a continuous group that covers almost the most important part, let's say 2/3 of Eurasia, the biggest landmass in the world, and this would encompass an economic zone that is larger than that of the European Union and that of the United States. And it also has a level of resources and also a technical talent that can be rather competitive. And by working together, we can actually we can seek synergies, and at the same time, we can also find a way of balancing the powers within Eurasia, so that there is no single power that is dominating others. In my personal opinion, having a balance, having a balance between powers is much more desirable than having one dominating power and all the others being subjugated to this power, because then you will have an asymmetric relationship, and it will not be as stable. So I think it is more desirable to have a more stable system, and this would help to create a more balanced system. And eventually this system can expand to include parts of Africa and Latin America, and perhaps in time also North America and Europe, Western Europe, so that we can gradually construct a system that does not have a hegemon, right? I don't think it's a great idea that now there's the United States and in the future there will be some other country, whatever that is, that can dictate, that can police around the world and dictate what other people should or should not do. That is in itself anti-democratic. I think it is good to have a balanced world order where everyone can freely exchange, right? And they can export what is great from them, what they can do more efficiently, and they can import what they lack, their weaknesses, and what they cannot manufacture or provide more efficiently. This, I think, from the point of view of a traditional, perhaps even Austrian economist, this will be an ideal scenario. And I think if China and India can work together, this can provide a sound basis, seeing that especially that both India and China have good relationships with Russia. This can provide a good foundation for building this system for the future. And one last thing I want to say is that in the 1950s, the early 1950s, China and India had a great relationship, and both were some of the earliest members and most important members of the Nine Alliance movement in the world. And I think, therefore, various reasons, which the nuances of which I must confess that I don't fully grasp, China and India had a split. And this, I think, has been a loss to Asia in general, and it has led to some of the, I think, has impeded in the development of Asian of Asian economy and society. So I think this is the first part, and in the second part I want to talk about some of the difficulties. And I must first and foremost I'm not going to beat around the bushes. There are some border disputes between China and India, and this is I must also point out is a legacy of British imperialism. That's as pure as that, because and in fact the problem in the subcontinent is also a result. It's also a legacy of British imperialism, because while there was some religious conflicts within the subcontinent, the British India, the way that the British divided, partitioned India into two countries, two countries, including one that is actually not contiguous, which of course then split into two different countries. This basically created a situation of instability. It is the imperialists, basically the British colonists, they created this current mess in the Indian subcontinent to make sure that the subcontinent will be weak, and that they would they hoped, I think, that their leaders will look to Britain for help, for assistance, so that British power, British interests can be maintained even after the independence of India. Now, in doing that, of course, they also left a legacy of border issues between India and China, because they drew a line. They said that this part is ours, even though a lot of those areas actually were largely uninhabited. So at the point it was never really settled, and it was never acknowledged by the Chinese government of the day. So now we have these border issues. So we must acknowledge that there are these issues, but we also must understand that there are a lot of benefits in working together. So I think it's possible to either shelve this issue and work together, cooperate together, and so perhaps establish some zones of mutual economic cooperation in that area, so that we don't have to necessarily immediately settle these issues, these differences, or more favorably, we can indeed seek diplomatic solutions, and through collaboration and negotiation, we can find a more definitive solution to these border disputes, and one that is satisfactory to both, and that we can proceed forward with the project that I mentioned in the first section of today's podcast. And then, of course, there is the problem that in the last few decades, since the split between India and China, there has been much less cultural exchange than it used to be. I think there are still very few exchange students, but I don't think there are that many. And as a result, this means that the two, I think, from the bottom, from the top leadership to the civilian population, mutual understanding is really wanting. So this actually creates a condition whereby because of a lack of understanding, it is more difficult for, at least from the civilian level, for the public to really understand what the other side thinks and why they act in certain ways. And then we see a lot of discussions on social media which are not flattering to either side, to each other. And this also further worsens the environment and creates an inertia that makes it difficult for the two to collaborate in the future. But these, I think, are issues that we can address, because we can encourage cultural exchanges. We can do this digitally, and also we should do it physically. We should exchange students, and we should have more economic ties that build tighter economic ties, and all these can help solve gradually, and I must admit this may not be done immediately, but gradually these issues can be fixed, because those are not fundamental structural issues. They are just a matter of inertia of old policies, right? So, and lastly, another difficulty, of course, is the so-called, I think it's mostly some imperialists' desire to keep the two separate. This includes one of the constructions by the United States in the form of the so-called Quad, which is aimed to leverage, I think the main aim is to really to leverage India against China. That's the unstated the goal. Of course, I think Japan and Australia are also included in the pact, but really I think the most important player in the Quad, of course the leading player is the United States, but the most important one is India, because Australia is always going to be close to America. It is part of the Anglo-Saxon sphere, of cultural sphere. This means that they will always be very tight and very close. And when it comes to Japan, well, Japan has some hesitancies because of what it had done before across Asia. So they have some hesitancies or weariness of the Chinese, where at the same time they also have large numbers of American military military presence, a lot of U.S. military bases. So they are not necessarily a real sovereign country. Just like Germany is not a really sovereign country. If you have, I like to joke that in Japan and in a lot of NATO countries, the U.S. military in those countries are stronger than the domestic military. So you can see that those are not necessarily sovereign countries who have full control of their own economic and foreign policies. This is not the case for Japan, for China and India. So that's Western divisions, perhaps imperialist souls. So that's the second part of today's podcast. And finally, let's just discuss a little bit of the likelihood. I think it is actually growing. It is. If you asked me a month ago, I would have said that perhaps in 10 years, in 15 years, 20 years, we will see more a rapprochement. Now, because of the military conflict in Eastern Europe, and then because of the reactions by perhaps primarily the United States, but also the European NATO states, in using the SWIFT and using the SWIFT as a weapon, using the dollar as a weapon, and seizing the sovereign asset of a country, seizing the assets of a sovereign country, violating the international law. That means that really, I think, pushes the schedule ahead a lot. I think in 2-3 years, it will not be impossible to foresee a Chinese-Indian rapprochement. Then they came this story of this crash move of threatening sanction against India. Now, I think just the threat alone pushed the state ahead by another year. If they go ahead with the sanction, I will not be surprised if India and China become much closer have a rapprochement and actively seek to address their differences within just 6 to 12 months. That is the effect of the brilliant policies of the Biden-Harris, let's call it administration. And if this happens, I think someone should indeed nominate Joe Biden for a Nobel Peace Prize, because I think he would then, if this really happens, then he will be, in my opinion, more worthy of a Nobel Peace Prize than Barack Obama, under whom he served as, of course, we know, the VP. All right, so this is today's podcast. I hope that there are some interesting ideas for you that can be valuable to you. Of course, if you like this podcast, please give it a thumbs up, like or share, and of course subscribe. And I apologize if I have been rumbling a little bit, because I got up a bit early today in the morning, and it's a little late today now in the evening, and I think I'm not speaking very, very clearly, so I apologize. Now, I have already had an idea of what the next podcast will be, so I will try to put that one out during the weekend as well. Thank you very much for listening, and have a great day.